Hello friends, you are welcome. Friends, in the last videos we talked about Dr. Johnson's preface to Shakespeare, and in that preface we talked about the first two parts of the preface. Actually, we divided preface to Shakespeare into five major parts, and in the previous videos we talked about Shakespeare as a timeless and universal figure, and in the second part we talked about Shakespeare's faults or demerits of Shakespeare given by Dr. Johnson. And friends, in this tutorial we are going to discuss about the remaining three parts of preface to Shakespeare. The third part, here we have Shakespeare as the product of Elizabethan age. Fourth part, we have Shakespeare, his criticism, or Dr. Johnson's balanced critique of Shakespeare. And the last part or fifth part is the text of Shakespeare, or Johnson on the text of Shakespeare. So friends, let's start with the third part of Dr. Johnson's preface, as we have divided it into five parts. So here we have third part or third section of preface. The third section is, Johnson says that Shakespeare is the product of Elizabethan age, or Shakespeare is the product of particular kind of age, because according to Dr. Johnson, no poet, no critic, no writer, no author is to be framed outside of the time. It must be framed in the time. So we cannot think about an author beyond the time limit. So time is very significant in which the author is lived. So here the time or the age of Shakespeare is the Elizabethan age, and generally this is a prosperous age in the history of English literature, and Shakespeare is the product of such prosperous age. And Dr. Johnson says that Shakespeare could build his abilities only based on this age, or that age was very significant and flourishing for the achievements of Shakespeare. And here we have his own words, how Johnson looks at the works of Shakespeare, or how Johnson evaluates the Shakespeare based on the Elizabethan age, or what is the contribution of Elizabethan age in the development of Shakespeare or any author. So let's understand through his own words. Every man's performances, to be rightly estimated, must be compared with the state of the age in which he lived, and with his own particular opportunities. And though to the reader a book not worse or better for the circumstances of the author, yet as there is always a silent reference of human works to human abilities. Thus, friend, if we look at the opinions or views of Johnson, we find that Johnson talks about Shakespeare's great achievement. At the same time, he also talks about the faults or demerits of Shakespeare. So here we find that he has a dual opinion. He has two different kinds of opinions, but he is expressing this opinion very straightly, and he says that we cannot think about Shakespeare beyond the age, beyond the Elizabethan circumstances. So circumstances makes an author, or these circumstances are helpful to building the achievements of any author, and Shakespeare is the product of that particular age. Now friends, next he talks about that there are so many scholars or critics who says that Shakespeare has given material from other sources, or it is not Shakespeare's own achievement. But again, Johnson says that though Shakespeare did not know Latin or any classical language, for example Greek, or there are charges against Shakespeare that Shakespeare even did not know proper English also. But here again Johnson defends Shakespeare that though he is not very well versed in any classical language or English, but he spoke the language of men. And again, giving to the reply to some of the critics, Johnson says that Shakespeare used other sources. For example, he built his histories or historical plays on the English chronicles, and this is very natural, or this is very instinctive, that any author can build on some previously existed sources, and the same thing has been done by Shakespeare. So Shakespeare cannot be blamed for his imitation, for his following of the English chronicles. So here we have again his own words. His English histories he took from English chronicles and English ballads, and as the ancient writers were made known to his countrymen by versions, they supplied him with new subjects. He dilated some of Plutarch's lives into plays when they had been translated by North. So according to Johnson, there is nothing bad in imitation. There is nothing bad in following the history, and Shakespeare did the exact thing, that he imitated the English chronicles and the ancient ballads, and he built his plays on these kinds of themes, or these kinds of pre-existed historical events. So Shakespeare should not be blamed for that. And again, in defense of the Shakespeare, he says that though Shakespeare becomes the a child of that particular age, but he has his own abilities, and he used those abilities in creating his plays, in developing his plays, in developing the plot structures and characters. So Shakespeare has that inner genius, as we have seen his remarks at the very initial in the first part, that how Shakespeare is above all writers a genius writer, and his characters are the progeny of common humanity. So this is the greatness of Shakespeare. And again, talking about Shakespeare, Johnson says that Shakespeare has been charged that he was a very poor person, and he ran to London, he came to London. Here Johnson compares his situation with Shakespeare, because Johnson also came to London in 1737, and Johnson also was a very poor person. But this poverty is not an obstacle in the very development of the plays of Shakespeare. So poverty cannot limit Shakespeare's genius. Poverty cannot limit Shakespeare's scholarness. So Shakespeare used all these things, though he caught in difficulties, though he faced a lot of difficulties in his personal life, but still he rose above all these difficulties, and hence he becomes the great person, the great poet, the great author. And here we find that Johnson compares himself with the Shakespeare, as the blow of poverty has been felt very severely by Johnson. He came to London, and there he spent so many years of his initial life in poverty, and after getting success in his writing, for example, he composed the dictionary of English language, and from there he could rise himself above some poverty line, and then he become prosperous. The same condition we find that with Shakespeare. So it is not any bad kind of thing in literature that an author faces poverty, and he should be charged on that poverty. So this is the situation of Shakespeare and Dr. Johnson. Then Johnson says that the work of any author, the work of any poet should be judged with the timelines, because Shakespeare's work or Shakespeare's genius came out of that particular age, out of that particular time. As we find that Ben Jonson very aptly said about Shakespeare, that he is not an age but the ages. So how Shakespeare becomes these ages? Here Johnson uses some metaphors to describe Shakespeare or the qualities of Shakespeare. We have his metaphor of jungle and the metaphor of garden. So let's read that metaphor. The work of a correct and regular writer is a garden accurately formed and diligently planted, varied with shades and scented with flowers. The composition of Shakespeare is a forest in which oak extend their branches and pines tower in their air, interspersed sometimes with weeds and brambles, and sometimes giving shelter to myrtles and to roses, filling the eye with awful pomp and gratifying the mind with endless diversity. So friends, here we find that Johnson describes Shakespeare like forest. So Shakespeare is not a garden of flowers, different colorful scented flowers, but he is a jungle, very vast and mysterious, and he extends his genius like the branches of oak trees, like the branches of very big trees, brambles, weeds. So this is the complexity of the works of Shakespeare. In a way, we find here Johnson defends Shakespeare, though he is seen in a particular age, that is the product of Elizabethan age, but he is like forest. So he is like mysterious, and whoever dives into the works of Shakespeare, he finds that mysteriousness, he finds that depth, and then he understands the genius of Shakespeare. So these are the words of Dr. Johnson regarding Shakespeare. Friends, this is the third part. In this third part, we saw that how Shakespeare is described in a particular age, or how he has been seen through an age, that is the Elizabethan age. Now friends, let's move to the next part or fourth part of the preface, and the fourth part is Shakespeare, Johnson's balanced critique. Now in this fourth part, Johnson very balancingly describes Shakespeare, and as we have seen that he is talking about the drawbacks or faults of Shakespeare, at the same time he is defending those drawbacks and demerits. And in this section he particularly emphasizes on the very works of Shakespeare, the qualities of Shakespeare, and some of the balanced critique. Very first he says that Shakespeare did not care about publishing his work. When we look at his plays, we find that his plays are ill organized, they do not have proper binding, they do not have proper documentation, and this charge is leveled against Shakespeare. Here further Johnson says that Shakespeare though did not care about the very publication of his works, there are some faults in his works. For example, he says that these are ill organized documentations, or his plays do not have proper grammar, proper style, proper kind of arrangement, and so many publishers rejected to publish the very plays of Shakespeare. And Shakespeare also never pay attention in the publication. Here we have Dr. Johnson's own words. The faults are more than could have happened without the occurrence of many causes. The style of Shakespeare was in itself ungrammatical, perplexed and obscure. His works were transcribed for the players by those who may be supposed to have seldom understood them. Now these are some of the, we can say that, faults of Shakespeare. He did not pay attention in publication because his documents or his plays are not organized, they are not in a proper style, they do not have proper grammar. Even Shakespeare lacks the grammar in his plays. When we look at his plays and when we read his plays, we also very strongly feel that there is no proper arrangement of the sentences or proper arrangement of the words. So he violates the rules of grammar. So this is, but again here, because we are talking about the balancing critique of Shakespeare, Johnson how balances this criticism? Johnson says that Shakespeare used the language of men. Shakespeare used the language of masses. Though the intellectuals of that time did not pay attention, or they did not take Shakespeare seriously, but the masses, the public, took Shakespeare seriously, and Shakespeare also spoke the language of masses. He spoke the language of men at that time, and hence he became so popular, so famous in those days. And later, when many critics discovered about the Shakespeare's writing, they also felt that this is not a very serious thing, that grammar should be followed in writing. So this is not a very serious thing when we look at the themes, the very treatment he gave to his works. So in this way Johnson defends Shakespeare. So this is fourth part of the preface, that is Johnson's balancing critique of Shakespeare. Now friends, we have here last part, that is on the text of Shakespeare. Now Dr. Johnson in this last section talks about the different editions of Shakespeare's play, because the first folio or the first edition of Shakespeare's plays came in 1623 after Shakespeare's death, and from there he has taken so many editions for his considerations, and he described those editions in a systematic way. And Johnson also comments on these editions, and these editions came with the edition of Dr. Johnson, which is appeared in 1765. From that time there were so many editions, and on almost many editions Johnson talks and he comments. So this is the last section, and this commentary is also very significant in the understanding of the Shakespearean editions of the plays. So friends, let's again discuss how this preface is significant in the whole literary criticism, because this preface has given new insights into the study of Shakespeare. And at the end of this preface, or in the last passage, Dr. Johnson has used these words. So let's understand these words so that we can get more insight into this preface. Among these candidates of inferior fame, I am now to stand the judgment of the public, and wish that I could confidently produce my commentary as equal to the encouragement which I have had the honor of receiving. Now friends, in these last words, Johnson says that it is up to the public, it is up to the readers that how they can take this edition, or how they can look at the Shakespearean criticism, how they look at the very preface to Shakespeare. It is up to the readers, it is up to the critics, it is up to the scholars, and it is up to also the public. So they have to build their opinion on this preface, because this is my own opinion, this is my own judgment, and I am very confident that public or the readers will hail this preface. So friend, this is all about preface to Shakespeare, a very prolific document by Dr. Johnson, and we talked about 5 parts of this preface. In the first 2 videos we talked about 2 parts, and in this video we talked about the last remaining 3 parts of this preface. Thank you very much for watching the complete tutorial. Please like this video, share this video among your friends, and subscribe to Literature Simply. And don't forget to press the bell notification icon for updates.